You've said that politics is a dirty game in the
Yeah,
past.
it is a dirty game. It's certainly true.
So if it is a game, how do you win at that game?
Well, you win at that game by getting the word out and by using sense. You have to have a feeling where it's going. You also have to have a feeling of what's right. You can't necessarily just go what's popular. You have to do what's good for a country if you're talking about countries. But you have to get the word out, and you have to just continuously, like, for instance, you have a great show. You have a great podcast. It's very well watched. And I'm sitting here and I do this. A lot of people see it. And I do other things, and a lot of people see that. And I go traditional also. You have traditional television, which is getting a little bit older and maybe less significant, could be less significant. I don't know. The whole plane of platform is changing a lot. It's changed a lot in the last 2-3 years. I just see that these platforms are starting to dominate. They're getting very big numbers. I did Spaces with Elon.
What the does that
And
have
they
to do
got
with
numbers
anything?
like nobody's ever heard before.
What does this have to do with anything, bro? He's just doing a reverse glaze. This is Donald Trump reverse glazing Lex and like independent media in general.
You wouldn't do that on like radio. You wouldn't do that, those numbers, no matter how good a show. You wouldn't do those.
That's idiotic. You're insane. Of course you do those numbers on radio. What the are you talking about? And also, radio wouldn't have the same issues Elon Musk had on Twitter. I really, this is so stupid, dude. It's so dumb. It's so wrong.
Those numbers on radio, you wouldn't do them on television.
You've been successful in business. You've been successful in politics. What do you think is the difference between gaining success between the two different, disparate worlds?
Yeah, and they're different, very different. I have a lot of people that are in business that are successful, and they'd like to go over to politics. And then you realize they can't speak. They choke. It's hard to make a speech in front of that. Let's say you're talking about a big audience, but I get very big audiences. And, for many people, it's virtually impossible to get up and speak for an hour and a half and have nobody leave. It's not an easy thing to do. And it's an ability. And now, if you talked about people in the business and politics going into business, likewise, that wouldn't generally work out so well either.
So you have to be able to make hard decisions like you do in business, but also be able to captivate an audience.
Look, if you're a politician, you have to be able to speak in front of large crowds. There are a lot of people who can't do that. I've seen it. They can't even think about doing it, and they don't. There are many people in business right now. I could name them, but I don't want to embarrass anybody. They've been talking about running for president for 15 years. And they're very big in business, very well known, actually. But it takes guts to run. Like for president, I can tell you it takes guts to run. It's also a very dangerous profession, if you want to know the truth, but dangerous in a different sense, too.
Dude, this is boring as fuck, dude. That's crazy. I'm not alone in this, right? Like, this is... This got no fucking juice, dude. This has zero juice. It is so fucking bad. He's like, oh yeah, people are too afraid of running for president. I'm not. It's very scary. It's not boring at all. I would love to examine your brain chatter. Holy I want to know. I want to know what has happened. Yeah, the Theo Von one was like way more interesting because like it's not worse than the other interview, but it does make him seem normal. No, the Theo Von one was like interesting because Theo Von is like an entertaining person. Unironically humanized him more, I think. This is just like fucking boring. He's like, oh, people can't talk in front of an audience for an hour and 30 minutes. It's like, this just sucks.
One of the great things about people from the business world is they're often great deal makers. And you're a great deal maker. And you've talked about the war in Ukraine and that you would be able to find a deal that both Putin and Zelensky would accept. What do you think that deal looks like?
I think the deal, and I wouldn't talk about it too much because I think I can make a deal. If I win as president-elect, I'll have a deal made, guaranteed. That's a war that shouldn't have happened. It's terrible. Look, Biden is the worst president in the history of our country, and she's probably worse than him. That's something that should have never happened.
I genuinely don't understand how like Lex conducts these interviews where he will just like say certain things. Like I know he's like the only centrist in the country, okay? Like the actual centrist, okay? Because he'll do this and then he'll talk to like a straight up communist and say the exact same like glaze and praise. Like I'm 100% certain that if he talked to Kamala Harris, I suspect he would do this exact same thing. Like he would say something along the lines of like, you know, you did a great job. many people say you did a great job as vice president or some shit. You know what I mean? Because like it's like a robotic formula, basically, the way that he conducts these interviews. The thing I don't understand, however, is that like, how can you say that with a fucking serious face to Donald Trump and be like, you're the great deal maker? Like, what do you mean? What deals has he made, dude? He has like 8 bankruptcies. What? Can you name some of the great deals that he has made? I don't think he's done any good deals at all.
And now it's a much tougher deal to make than it would have been before it started. Millions of people. I think the number is going to be a lot higher when you see this all at some point iron out. I think the death numbers are going to be a lot higher than people think.
This is one of the things that annoys the living shit out of me. Donald Trump makes these bold statements on a regular fucking basis, and then there's no follow-up. There's no like, how are you going to do this? There's never even a, how are you going to pay for it? People have just completely caved on the issue. Like, he could just say whatever the fuck he wants, and 0 people will be like, okay, that seems like a good idea. How would you do it? Like, nobody asked him this shit. And it's wild because, like, on the other side, you got Kamala Harris can have like a decent policy, and immediately they're like, how are you going to pay for it? And then she describes like, price gouging, which is vague still, right? And how they're going to follow through on the price gouging, like going after price gouging corporations and those promises. And then she'll give like a wishy-washy answer on that. And then people are like, okay, well, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to do this? Yada, yada, yada. There is definitely a lot of advantages that you get on the Republican side when you're running for office in terms of like how much your policies are called into question. Whereas like Democrats being the adult in the room obviously get that adult in the room benefit in terms of like the way people analyze them in the polls, in terms of like the way people vote for the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, but also simultaneously like they get a shit ton more scrutiny in general. It is a little annoying to see that double standard in the media in general. Whereas like for Donald Trump, he'll say something one day and say the exact opposite a couple hours later, and the media will report it as he just said 2 different things, but never follow through directly on like where he lands on an issue. And they'll just kind of drop it because he has so successfully evaded ever answering any sort of like policy related issues with a firm commitment, I mean, look at just what happened for this question. He was asked, what are the details of how you're going to get peace in Ukraine? He was just went, it's a bad war. Biden is bad next. No follow-up, no pressure. One of the only times where I've ever seen Trump be held accountable for his statements, and this is like, this experience lives in my mind, was the Axios interview he did with Jonathan Swan in the midst of COVID. When the Axios interviewer just straight up was like, okay, well, you're wrong. Here's how you're wrong. He held him accountable for the statements that he made. When you're so far gone on the right wing, some center right news media looks like radical left. Holy shit. It ends up making good content in general too. So I think that like liberal media should probably do that a little bit more. And Axios is obviously center right, by the way. Axios is a center right publication. That's why Donald Trump gave them the interview, which was a mistake for him at the end of the day because he actually was held accountable.
When you take a look at the destruction and the buildings coming down all over the place in Ukraine, and there are people in those buildings, and they have no chance. Once they start coming down, there's no chance. So
he's not talking about Gaza. He's talking about Ukraine.
So that's a war that absolutely has to get done. And then you have
Eduardo 32,
Israel, and then you have a lot of other places that are talking war. The world is a rough place right now. And a lot of it's because of the fact that America has no leadership. And I believe that she'll be probably worse than Biden. I watched the interview the other night. I mean, it was just a softball interview.
So you would like to see her do more interviews, challenged more?
I don't know. I can't believe the whole thing is happening. We had a man in there that should have never been in there. You had somebody in there, and now we have a woman that is not, I mean, she couldn't do an interview. This was a really soft interview. This is an interview where they're given a multiple choice questions, multiple guess. I call it multiple guess. And I don't think she did well. I think she did very poorly.
How do you think you'll do in the debate coming up? It's in a few days.
So I've done a lot of debating, only as a politician. I never debated. My first debate was the Rosie O'Donnell debate, right? The famous Rosie O'Donnell debate, the answer. But I've done well with debates. I mean, I became president. Then the second time, I got millions more votes than I got the first time. So I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that. And
damn, man. If only, oh shit, he's admitting he lost. If only there was like I don't know, like a crazy world-changing global event that occurred that also caused the American government to open up the way that people vote, you know, universal ballot registration, universal access, mail-in ballots across the board, which allowed a lot more people to vote. A lot more people to vote for the Republican Party, but also a lot more people to vote for the Democratic Party.
Look what happened with inflation, because inflation's just eating up our country, eating it up. So it's too bad. But there are a lot of things that could happen. We have to get those wars settled. We have to get, I'll tell you, you have to get Ukraine done. That could end up in a third world war. So could the Middle East. So could the Middle East. The kind of destruction that we're witnessing now, nobody's ever seen. I mean, it's a terrible thing. And we're witnessing it all over. We're witnessing it in all parts of the world. And a lot of things are going to get started. Look what's going on.
He says the most basic things, talks like a child. How do people take him seriously? I don't get it. I don't think you understand. Like, a lot of people are just fucking stupid. And he communicates to stupid people very well. The basic advantage that he has in this situation is that, yes, a lot of wars have happened under the Biden regime, are directly the fault and responsibility of Biden in terms of its continuation. Others aren't necessarily all his fault, but he 100% can take advantage of that. Just like Joseph Robinette Biden was able to take advantage of the fact that COVID happened under Donald Trump. I think he does a pretty solid job of communicating that, like, yeah, I'm going to be the peace candidate. Is that true? Of course not. But does it matter? No. In terms of like winning the narrative on key issues, he does a great job in comparison to the Democratic Party, which has completely lost the we are the peace party. It's very odd.
On with China. Look at Japan. They're starting to rearm now. They're starting to rearm because China's getting, taking over certain islands. And there's a lot of danger in the war right now in the world. There's a great possibility of World War III. And we better get this thing done fast, because 5 months with people like her and him, he's checked out. He just goes to the beach and thinks he looks good in a bathing suit, which he doesn't. He's sort of checked out. Hey, look, you can't blame him. That was a coup. They took it over. They took over the presidential deal. The whole presidential thing was taken over in a coup. He had 14 million votes. She had no votes, not one. And nobody thought it was going to be her. Nobody wanted it to be her. She was a joke until 6 weeks ago when they said we're going to have to, politically, they felt they had to pick her. And if they didn't pick her, they thought there'd be a problem. I don't know if that's right or not. I actually don't think it's right, but, they thought it was right. And now immediately the press comes to their aid.
If we can go back to China, how do we avoid war with China in the 21st century?
Well, there are ways. Now, here's the problem. If I tell you how, and I'd love to do it, if I give you a plan, like I have a very exacting plan how to stop Ukraine and Russia, and I have a certain idea, maybe not a plan, but an idea for China, because we're in a lot of trouble. They'll be in a lot of trouble too, but we're in a lot of trouble. But I can't give you those plans, because if I give you those plans, I'm not going to be able to use them. They'll be very unsuccessful. Part of it's surprise, right?
Right.
But they won't be able to help us much.
I'm an independent. I have a lot of friends who are independent, many of whom like your policies.
So you guys aren't independent. Okay, got it. I love Americans and their belief that, like, dude, so many Americans just say they're independent and then turn around and be like, but I really like your policies. Like, what policies then? What policies do you like as an independent? The thing I will never understand is, I guess like they like the massive tax cuts that rich people got. Is that what it is? It's just people who are too embarrassed to admit they're Republican. Yeah, you can be independent and like someone's policies. Dude, the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party when you remove all of the flavoring is that the Democrats offer less tax cuts, but still offer tax cuts and deregulation. The Republicans offer broader tax cuts and more deregulation. But the major difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the Republicans will consistently say it's black and brown people that are causing your life to be shit, and we're going to put harm on them. We're going to do harm to them directly, and then that will magically make your life better, which it never does, but they still say it anyway, and they still make you believe it. That's the major difference. And it's not like the Democrats don't continue along with policies that harm black and brown people either. They do. They just don't present it as like the major difference. And that's The big difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Yeah, centrist is a person who is smart. Rights and lefts are both dumb and wrong. Yeah, thank you.